What if I told you that a simple cheek swab taken in modern-day Michigan could, like, legally authenticate the faded, insect-eaten handwriting of a Spanish priest from the year 1694?
I mean, it sounds completely like science fiction.
Right. But welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to crack open this really fascinating dossier called Case 004, Progenitor Origins.
Yeah, it's a massive stack of research.
It really is. We are looking at, paleographic transcriptions of 17th century registries, colonial migration maps, and some serious forensic genomic analysis. And all of this was compiled by Roger Alvarez III. He's a forensic genealogist who basically took on this monumental task.
Ambitious is, well, it's almost an understatement for what Roger accomplished here.
Yeah.
Definitely. His objective was to establish an unbroken, verifiable paternal line connecting his 20th century Tejano family, who had eventually migrated up from the Texas borderlands into, like, the industrial manufacturing pipelines of Michigan, all the way back to a 17th century Spanish voyager.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. Bridging a 300-year gap across oceans, shifting national borders, and dealing with these fragmented colonial archives is notoriously difficult.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because tracing a lineage back that far requires way more than just clicking through online census records.
Right, absolutely.
Or just accepting whatever hints an ancestry algorithm feeds you,
Yeah, it demands an entirely different methodology. So Roger built this case strictly using the genealogical proof standard, the GPS.
Right, the GPS.
And in the world of forensic lineage tracing, the GPS isn't just like a neat guideline. It's a rigorous legal and scientific framework. It requires exhaustive search parameters, complete source citations, and you have to deeply understand historical migration patterns.
Plus resolving any conflicting data you find, right?
Exactly. And crucially, for modern applications like this one, it requires synthesizing the traditional documentary paper trail with hard biological evidence.
Which means, I guess we can't just jump straight back to the 1600s.
No, definitely not.
To go back 3 centuries, you first have to build this concrete foundation in the more recent past.
You have to anchor it.
Right. And for this investigation, that foundation is Roger's 3 times great-grandfather, Encarnacion Alvarez Gaona. The records place his birth in 1853 in Galeana.
Which is a municipality in Nuevo León, Mexico.
Wow. And securing that 1853 geographical anchor is basically the linchpin of the entire investigation because of this massive structural hurdle in Hispanic genealogy, right? The same name trap.
Same name trap. Yeah, it's a nightmare for researchers.
Let's delve into the mechanics of that for a second, because I imagine the same name trap isn't just about a name being popular. Like, it has to do with how surnames were actually adopted and passed down in 19th century Mexico.
Precisely. You have patronymic naming conventions, limited surname pools in these isolated regions, and, well, the historical reality that a lot of indigenous or mestizo families adopted the surnames of prominent estate owners.
Oh, wow.
So if you search for an Alvarez in Mexico in the 1850s, without a highly specific geographic parameter, you are just going to drown in false positives.
You're essentially looking for a statistical ghost at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Roger had to establish an undeniable, localized anchor to ensure he was actually tracking the correct biological line.
Yeah.
And not just, someone who happened to share the same last name.
And he found that undeniable anchor in an 1853 marriage extraction. It's the record for Encarnacion's parents, Pablo Alvarez Aparicio and Maria Dionisia Gana Albares.
And the key detail here is the location.
Yes. They were married at the Capilla de la Hacienda El Potosí. So they were inextricably tied to this specific estate.
Right.
Taking a modern tech campus analogy for you listening, it's like finding an ancestor whose entire life, their employment, their housing, healthcare, social network, it was all confined to a massive, self-contained corporate town.
That's a really good way to think about it. The Hacienda El Potosí wasn't just a farm. It was this closed-loop socioeconomic system that kept meticulous centralized records of everyone living there.
And building on that closed-loop concept, because the hacienda was such an insulated ecosystem, the records reveal this highly unusual forensic anomaly.
Oh, the double branch convergence.
Yeah. Pablo's father was an Alvarez, and Dionisia's mother was an Albares, though spelled with a B and an S.
Right, which is really just a phonetic variation before standardized orthography became a thing.
But I have to stop you there and push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
If the genealogical proof standard is as strict as you say, how can Roger definitively prove that a single hacienda marriage record isn't just a clerical error?
That's a fair question.
I mean, two people with the Alvarez surname marrying each other sounds like a massive red flag for, like, a transcription mistake by some overworked priest, not necessarily a genealogical breakthrough.
That is a very necessary skepticism to have. A single name repetition could easily just be a clerical error.
Right.
But Roger didn't rely on just the marriage certificate. Under the GPS, he had to cross-reference baptismal records, census data, and church dispensations.
Church dispensation?
Yeah, the Catholic Church in the time kept incredibly strict records regarding consanguinity, basically blood relationships. In these colonial estate systems, distant cousins frequently intermarried to consolidate land rights or maintain their standing within the hacienda's hierarchy.
Oh, so it was strategic.
Very. And Roger located the actual dispensations, proving this wasn't a clerical error. It was a deliberate, fully documented union. The terminal Alvarez line literally splits into two separate, verifiable Alvarez branches that converge right there at El Potosí.
That is amazing. And securing that highly localized, undeniable 1853 anchor is basically the only reason Roger had a stable enough platform to cross the chaotic, poorly documented era of the Mexican War of Independence.
That era is a black hole for a lot of researchers.
Right. But that geographical certainty allowed him to locate the next major milestone. So we're pushing back to Generation 6 now, the year 1798. Roger locates the marriage record of José Antonio Alvarez and Maria Gertrudis de la Garza in the archives of Monterrey.
And this document introduces a massive geographical anomaly into the case.
It really does. The extraction notes that the priest explicitly recorded José Antonio and his parents as originarias de la villa de Soto la Marina.
Which is huge.
Yeah, that is a coastal settlement right on the Gulf of Mexico in modern-day Tamaulipas. It fundamentally shifts the whole trajectory. They weren't deeply rooted mountain people. They were from the coast.
It gives Roger a highly specific new target, right? Soto la Marina. He knows the preceding generation, Francisco Alvarez, the 7 times great-grandfather, he had to be located there.
But when he targets the Soto la Marina archives, the timeline totally shatters.
It hits a brick wall.
Exactly. The records clearly show Francisco having children there in the 1760s. The baptismal documents exist. But when Roger searches for Francisco's own birth or marriage records in Soto la Marina, there is absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
It's like finding a fully grown oak tree in a brand new, freshly paved subdivision. You know it wasn't grown from seed in that soil. It had to be transplanted from somewhere else. Francisco is a transplant, so where's the nursery?
Well, to find the nursery, you have to look at the macro-historical context of the region, because Soto la Marina didn't even exist before 1750.
Wait, really? A completely blank slate?
Entirely. On September 3rd, 1750, a Spanish military officer named José de Escandón officially founded Soto la Marina.
Okay, so it was a brand new colonial project.
Yeah, he was mandated by the Spanish crown to colonize the Nuevo Santander province, largely to create a buffer zone against encroaching colonial powers and semi-nomadic indigenous tribes.
Right, they needed people to hold the territory.
Exactly. So Escandón recruited families from established inland settlements, offering them land grants and tax exemptions to basically brave the unforgiving coastal frontier.
Wow.
So Francisco couldn't have been born in Soto la Marina because it was pure wilderness when he was a child. He was an original pioneer colonist.
Which means Roger had to conduct a broad sweep of the ecclesiastical archives across the interior of New Spain prior to 1750. He's looking for the specific transplant that matches Francisco.
And he finds it.
He does. He finds the 1746 marriage record registered hundreds of miles inland, right back in Monterrey.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the broader narrative that emerges here is just brilliant. Roger didn't uncover a straight linear migration map. He uncovered a massive circular migration loop.
Oh, that's such a cool way to frame it.
Right. The family was firmly entrenched in the mountains of Monterrey in the early 1700s. Then, around 1750, Francisco leaves the relative safety of the mountains to serve as a pioneer colonist on the dangerous Gulf Coast at Soto la Marina.
And then they go back.
Yeah. A full generation later, his son José Antonio migrates back inland to Monterrey in 1798. From there, subsequent generations drift south into the hacienda systems of Guyana before the modern descendants push north into Texas.
Entering into the vaquero culture of the King Ranch, right?
Exactly. And finally, following the industrial boom into Michigan.
It is just a staggering geographic journey. But to find the origin of that journey, the first voyager, we have to stay in Monterrey and push into the deepest, most fragile archives imaginable, the Sagrario Metropolitano.
Yeah, we're targeting the late 17th century now.
And this is where the physical reality of traditional methodology becomes a massive hurdle, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Paleographic transcription of 17th century Spanish colonial documents